How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. So, as many of you know, this is the second Sunday of the month here, and we like to do this thing called Sharing Our Journey, where we have a member of our community come up here and tell us a little bit about their life and their journey. So, we're very happy to have Rover come up and do that this morning. Thank you for doing that. As everybody knows, Rover is the kind of the Wizard of Oz of Ladera Community Church. The man behind the desk back there who makes all of the audio-visual technology work, which has been such a blessing, especially this year when we had to really jump headfirst into virtual everything. But now that you're here at the front of the church, we'd love to hear a little bit about, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about, where you grew up, your family, your life as a child, any spiritual traditions that you practiced as a young person.
Sure, love to. Of course, whenever you say let's start at the very beginning, I always, having that musical theater thing when I go, a very good place to start.
Yes.
Of course, where else could you start, right? Let's start at the end. I'm not sure that's a good idea. And of course, the wonderful thing about being the wizard behind the curtain is that you get to stay behind the curtain and no one notices you. So being up in front is a very different experience. Although that sort of segues in some ways into the beginning for me, because so I grew up I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I was actually born in Newton Wellesley Hospital in Massachusetts. My parents met there. My father was actually from Lancaster County, and they moved back to Pennsylvania when I was about 2 years old. And I grew up there. During the time that I was I guess, so going back just a little bit farther, it's sort of interesting because I didn't really have what I would call a spiritual tradition, which in some ways you kind of go, well, being a child of the 60s, that, everyone was, that was like the birth of spiritual traditions, et cetera. But my mother was raised Roman Catholic. My father was raised Baptist, just sort of regular Baptist, as opposed to Southern Baptist. And, they were pretty, straightforward religious types. My mother actually had given up the church, and then I think it must have been shortly before or after I was born, encountered the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's what I was raised as. So my tradition was a very much more rigid tradition of interpretation of the Bible that was in many ways very literal. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes I think back, I've talked about how there's a very circular reasoning that they use, which is that, well, the Bible talks about XYZ happening, and archaeologically, we have proven that XYZ happened. Therefore, the Bible must be true. And since, of course, you start to extend that beyond the idea of, there's no mention of life in outer space because it's not in the Bible. Well, when you consider the fact that the Bible was written by people who had no idea or never considered possibly the idea of life in outer space, but of course it was from God. So if it didn't exist, it's not in the Bible. Well, America wasn't in the Bible. So but anyway, that's my long short story, I suppose, in some ways, of where I came from and the traditions that I got brought up with. Now, one of the things that came in really handy was going out and going door to door, actually going, and even as a young kid, when I was probably, I'd say 7 or 8 years old, I'd get up in front of the congregation and I'd read a scripture, and then have a little sermon to give. As I got a little older, it got more and more so. So public speaking actually was something that was never really bothered me too much as a kid.
Really cool. How many people could say that? That's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned musical theater too. When did you start with that? Was that something you started as a kid, or?
For me, that I guess started probably around high school. ninth grade was, I think, the first time that I actually went to a high school, one of our high school musicals. And I was talking with a friend of mine about it the other day, and I can't remember precisely why, but they were talking about how to succeed in business without really trying, which is one of the older classic musicals. The first one I actually saw was Guys and Dolls, which is by the same writing duo, which is about, I think, 4 or 5 years earlier. And then and that was the ninth grade one. And I fell in love with it. I listened to that. I could probably still sing every song from that show. And then How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying was the next year. And once again, I can probably sing just about every song from that show.
Yeah. I have similar memories of that. I could sing every song from Aladdin, Annie, those kinds of things.
Right.
my time with that as well. So tell us a little bit about how you got from Pennsylvania to the Bay Area.
Oh, right. So, once again, kind of going back to my parents, and as I started getting older and developing independence and things like that, my view of the world was definitely not agreeing with their view of the world anymore. And they actually kicked me out when I was 17. And I then briefly ended up down in Florida living with my grandmother, and then I joined the Navy. And at the time, being 1983, there were some things about my life that evidently didn't agree with them, and they kicked me out and gave me basically a bus ticket to anywhere I wanted to go in the United States. And a friend of mine, I was stationed in Florida again at the time, but a friend of mine was from Santa Cruz and said that he could set me up with his friends for a place to stay while I got myself settled. And I was like, California's supposed to be the dreamland, right? And why not? So I got on a bus and spent 4 days going out to Santa Cruz, and I've been in California ever since.
Oh, wow.
With a few little breaks. I actually, living in California can be rough, especially if you don't have a lot of money and so forth, and you're young, and so I went back home a couple times, but that still didn't work. So back out I came.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up physically out here.
Yeah. Right. And the next question is, is like, how have your beliefs or spiritual traditions, how have they changed in that time?
They have obviously changed a lot. And they've been through a number of different transitions. And I suppose, like anything else, in many ways, they're always in transition. So one of the things that happened with me at some point, once again, in one of the, life has ups and downs and highs and lows and so forth. And, there was a low point that I was going through, and a friend of mine had started practicing with a Buddhist organization, which was a rather interesting Buddhist organization in that it was a Buddhist lay organization, a very large one. And in some ways, not unlike the Jehovah's Witnesses, because there was very much the meditative practice and the importance of spending every morning in that ritual. Every morning and evening, you'd get up in the morning and you'd pray and chant and meditate, and you'd study. But another very important part of what they did was they would actually go out, not quite door to door, but we'd go out on the street, and we'd say, "Hey, have you heard of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo?" And I don't know if anyone remembers this. This was this was a really big movement in the United States from shortly after World War II up through, I would say, the late 80s, early 90s. And that organization is still there. It's still big and so forth. They don't quite do but so that going out and going door to door, here, look, I was right at it again. But there were some things about that organization that didn't always fit.
Right.
And I think that's the thing is in almost any any religion or any organization, not everything's going to always fit all the time.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
find, it's finding balance. But, I learned a lot from that. I did a lot of study, and I've continued studying. And I think in general, what I would, I tend to think of myself more as, and that's part of the significance of my name as being a rover, is that I'm an explorer,
Yeah.
and I constantly am trying to explore and learn,
Yeah.
both internally and externally.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, is a wonderful thing about religion.
Yeah.
I love being able to look at religious traditions and look at their beliefs and to find those core truths that are
Yeah, for sure.
that are really the important part.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you look at the things Jesus taught, what's and what is the simplest message, that you have to love your brother and you love others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And there's two important parts of that. You have to love yourself,
Right.
as well as loving others. You can't do, the two are linked.
Yeah.
And from the Buddhist perspective, you've got a very similar thing of like, as within, so without.
Yeah.
The world is a reflection of your inner self.
Yeah.
And how you, and I was talking with Martha yesterday. Attitude is so much a part of how we interact with the world. And if you interact with the world in a very negative way, you're going to get negative energy back. If you interact with it in a positive way and you have hopefulness, you're going to get hope and positive energy back.
Yeah.
And of course, sending that out into the world is hopefully just going to make the world a better place for everybody.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So would you say that there are, in addition to the sort of the differences and the points of dissonance in the different space that you've explored, that there are through lines
Yes,
you've seen in all of them that you've kind of held on to?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, for me, I think, to keep doing all the time, is you keep, you encounter people and you listen to their stories.
Yeah.
Even at work, I've got a coworker that I've been sitting with in the morning. He and I both get in very early, unfortunately, usually about 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And we'll spend a couple minutes talking, and it's been more and more interesting because he actually taught Latin, but has a very classical education.
Okay.
And I'll tell him a story about something I was thinking about, whether from something in literature or something. He's like, "Oh, that's really interesting, and that's a reference to this." I'm like, "Wow, I hadn't realized that." It's like, "Yeah, that is. You're right." Yeah, and to me, making connections. One of my favorite shows on PBS back in the 80s was Connections. And I don't know if you remember,
it was before my time.
It probably, there were a couple shows, but it's wonderful to make those connections, of those through lines. It's like, this led to this, led to this, led to this. And that's the wonderful, for me, that's once again, the important thing about history. It's not this happened then, that happened now, so-and-so did that. It was what were the connections that caused this to happen?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of connections, so the next question is about, obviously you joined LCC last fall. We were doing shelter in place and that whole thing. So how has it been joining the church at that time? And do you feel like you're connecting with people? Do you feel like you're becoming a part of the church? How is your experience as a new member?
My experience is wonderful. I mean, as a member, it's been great, and the show of support is definitely there, on both sides. It's interesting because one of the reasons I decided to come to Jeff and ask about joining at the time was because of course, Sam, had started playing, and I had started to come in. I'd been coming every now and then. If you remember, could have been every 3-4 months, could have been, a little more often. And then, I started becoming a little bit more involved, helping out with things. And then, of course, the pandemic came around, and the more I did that, of course, I got to listen to Lindsay and to Jeff more and more, and really resonated with the message that I was hearing. And was, and I so much enjoyed doing what I was doing that my becoming a member of the congregation wasn't only saying, I really enjoy what I'm hearing and experiencing. I want to make a commitment to the congregation that I want to help as well. That was, and that's why I joined. And of course, it's just been a very mutual experience of just, it's worked out so well for, I think, me and for everyone else. I love helping, and I know how much everyone enjoys my presence here, and I enjoy seeing every single person and and trying to get to know them better. It's sometimes it's hard because, as I said, I sit back there in the corner, I do my thing, and people see me. It's like I can be very busy in the morning. It's like I'm here, there, getting everything set up and so forth, and I forget to say, and it's like, oh wait, I need to go say hi to people. I need to like and of course, after everyone else is socializing, it's like, oh, I gotta get everything done, get it all put away, and oh, I forgot to say so, and see how so and so's doing.
Yes, well, we do very much enjoy your presence, that's for sure, and very much appreciate your help. What would we do without Rover? So, last official question. I have a surprise question. I hope you'll bear with me. But the last official question is: so, what's the future hold for you? What are some things you want to do going forward?
Well, I think there are a few things that I definitely want to do, and they've got nothing to do with technology. They're really all to do with how I, and one of them actually has to do a little bit with some of the things that you've been talking about with composting and having organic farming and protecting the earth, and that is a very important part of the way I look at the world. Is also, and it's like, once again, let's just use the Bible as a reference if we want to, what were we told to do? We were told to take care of the earth. And that is what we need to do. We can't just sort of say, oh, it's ours to do with what we want. We have to take care of it. And recently I had seen a video on, I think it was Twitter. It was a really short one because it's Twitter. And this person's talking about how, you don't have to worry about becoming a zero waste, because that was really designed for corporations, because corporations design so much more waste than people do. It isn't to say that we shouldn't try to be zero waste. And I work very hard to try to do that. But I started thinking more about how to bring that into the workplace. How to, and for example, in our office, we've got a pretty, it's kind of like all concrete walls and ceiling, and it gets to be a little echoey and loud in there and so forth. And we were talking about what to do about that for a sound perspective. It's like, we could go and order some things, but I happen to know someone who can sew those, and I'd like to take that home, and rather than send that money out into someone who's spending much too much money trying to help themselves go to the Pluto, I believe it is, or Mars. Give it to someone local, and at the same time create less waste in the world. Rather than go out and have everything shipped to you and create all those cardboard boxes and all those plastic bags, which find, and I'm trying to, and I'd love to find a way to bring that to more people and more companies.
I love that. I so agree. Like we often think of, like, when it comes to sustainability and stuff, oh, it's a trade-off. I have to, sacrifice this to do this, but there are things where you can synergize too, or you can, support a local business and it's more sustainable. So I love finding those things as well, and telling people about them and getting those out in the world. Great. So last question, surprise question. Answer it however you want. What matters to you and why? Some people know this one. It's this kind of a Stanford question that they ask at Stanford events, but I love it. Everybody has a different answer. So
what? Oh dear.
Hear your answer.
What matters to me and why? Well, I guess, actually, what matters to me
Yeah.
are truly the simple things in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to use something that someone I talked about recently, not here, but as someone said, some of the best things in life are eating good food,
Yeah. Absolutely.
spending time with good friends,
Yeah.
and spending time with good friends eating and talking about food.
All the different combinations.
All those
of food
combinations.
and friends.
But yeah, I mean, I think the more and more as I look at things, and once again, that all that thread of life is all finding the simplicity of life.
Yeah.
It's the peace, that center stream that goes through all the noise that's up and down and up and down, and inside of it all, there's just this stream of that, and that's the simple part, and that's and once again, from the Buddhist perspective, it's the middle way, finding
Right.
and that's what matters most to me. It's not about having more or it is about doing more.
Yeah.
I have a hard time not doing, and that's probably one of the things I need to work on sometimes. Is it's like it's okay to sit and read, and I'd like to read more. I can always spend more time studying, and saying it's okay not to do or to have to feel like you have to fix it. And once again, listening to Jeff has helped me do that, because there are times it's like you don't have to go help that person with their problem. Sometimes just listen to what's going on, or at least empathize with them, and bring and take it inside. And that in its own way, that might be all you need to do. Once again, it's the simple things you can do.
I love that. And we certainly appreciate all that you do here at Ladera. So thank you so much for coming up here, being in the hot seat, and
Thanks.
sharing your life with us.
Yeah, sure.